He will talk about what's it like to start a career in Portugal in the gaming industry. And since he was a student here at Technico, it will be very helpful for you guys. Thank you and enjoy. Round of applause, please.
Yeah. So, hello everyone. Thank you for having me. We're going to talk a little bit about gameplay programming and turning code into fun. Now, you might have noticed this little asterisk above fun. And the reason why it's there is because when we look at the definition of fun, we see things like enjoyment, amusement, or lighthearted pleasure. But when we think about some games, even games that we love, maybe fun is not the best way to describe them. Scary, tense, sad, depressing, deep, or clever may describe certain games better. But for many years, game development was stuck with the idea of games having to be almost mindlessly fun. So when we talk about fun in relation to games, we are mostly talking about engagement. They are almost like a synonym. So my name is João. As Andrés just said, I studied here, did my bachelor's here. I've been making games since 2015, and I've been working professionally in game dev since 2017. I first started out here in Lisbon in Miniclip, doing mobile games for iOS and Android, where I worked on Agario for most of the time, but I also helped out a bit in Minimalicia. It's this game at the bottom. I then moved from mobile to VR, working with Unity at Virtualip, working on Enhance, which is a brain training app. And then I went back to mobile for a very short stint at Super Evil Megacorp, working remotely to San Francisco, giving out a hand on Catalyst Black. But then the time came that I felt that I needed to search for a bigger, better opportunity. And that's when I flew to Sweden to join Massive, where I am a gameplay programmer working on PC and console titles. So about Massive, Massive was founded in 1997. It joined the Ubisoft family in 2008. We are currently more than 700 employees, but we are, I think, closer to 800 than 700 at this point. We come from all over the world. I think I work with more than 6 or 7 nationalities, just in my close team. And we are located in the lovely city of Malmö, Sweden. Malmö is the third biggest city in Sweden, but it's the biggest one in terms of game development. It has a booming industry over there. It kind of reflects Massive in a bit, because there's more than 170 nationalities. So again, people from all over the world. And it's a cozy, small town. You can go anywhere with bike or walking. But if you want something more chaotic, you can just cross the bridge and go to Copenhagen. Now, over the course of our existence, we shipped 8 games, not counting expansions. We first started with Ground Control 2, and World in Conflict, which are RTS. This means real-time strategy games. These games were released before joining Ubisoft. And then once we joined Ubisoft, our first projects were as a co-development studio. Our co-development studio means that you are a studio that helps out a lead studio to ship a game. So we first started with Assassin's Creed Revelations, where we handled the present time, kind of like dreamlike sequences for those of you who played it. We then did the multiplayer mode for Far Cry 3, and after releasing Just Dance Now, which was a mobile spin-off to the Just Dance series, we released our first game as a lead studio, and the one that most people associate us with, Tom Clancy's The Division, which was an internal and external success, breaking a lot of sales records. And we were not done with The Division, so we later released The Division 2, which is still in active development with new content dropping regularly. Now, besides games, we are also the home of Ubisoft Connect. And Ubisoft Connect is an ecosystem of player services for Ubisoft games across all platforms. It aims at giving the best environment for all players to enjoy their games and connect with each other, whatever the device. And last, but definitely not least, We are the proud home of Snowdrop. Now, Snowdrop is the engine that made The Division and The Division 2 possible. But other studios at Ubisoft have also used it in their games, and the different titles that we can see here speak for Snowdrop's versatility. But for a better overview of what Snowdrop is and what it allows, I have a small video to show you.
Massive, we're driven by the love of making games. We want to make the best games in the world for the pleasure of gamers. And to do that, we are in love with the actual craft of making games. Massive is a studio that loves engineers. The engineers are the magicians that transform a thought that someone has or an abstract idea that someone has, and they transform it into something tangible and something beautiful. We couldn't do that without engineers. Everything we do is based on Snowdrop. Snowdrop is the game engine, but it's also a tools suite that allows the creators to add their content to the game.
The power of Snowdrop comes from a number of systems that enable developers to keep developing and iterating quickly and smoothly. We create all of Snowdrop ourselves in C++. It's a technology that's not only very easy to adapt to new ideas, but to add new things to. It's a perfect canvas for someone to come along and add incredible new facilities to.
The highlight of Snowdrop for me is the node graph system. We use that system for everything from just setting the colors of the cars in the Division to driving the actual AI MC behaviors.
As a gameplay programmer, I work really closely with the designers and I provide all the tools for them to do their magic. I think the coolest feature of the Snowdrop is that it's node-based, and whenever the designers start working in it, they only get restricted functionality. But later on, they can open up one of the nodes and wow, it has lots of logic in it.
Obviously, Snowdrop is proven tech. We've shipped a number of great games with them, but the variety of those games speaks to not just how Snowdrop is mature, but also flexible.
The development of the Snowdrop engine is driven by the games. It's what the game needs that decide what goes into the engine and what subsystems we're improving or adding to.
As an Ubisoft studio, we regularly collaborate with other studios all over the world, making everything we do an incredible international effort.
In technology, we know that there are many mysteries remaining. The future of games isn't fully explored yet. So someone needs to be in the middle of that frontier and do the work and dare to do the R&D that will take us into the future. And that's exactly what we're doing here at Massive.
Okay, so let's talk about game programming. When we start looking at the different disciplines in game programming, we can see things like tools, engine, physics, audio, graphics, gameplay, QA, UI, input, network, porting, etc., etc., etc. The list can be very extensive, and it varies according to the type of game you are making. If you're making a single-player game, maybe you won't have a network programmer. Maybe your game doesn't have audio for some odd reason, you won't have an audio programmer. But it also depends on the studio. There are studios that merge these things together, that split them up, that come up with things that are very specific for what they're doing. So putting up a list that covers everything is kind of hard. But if we look just at gameplay programming, so not game programming, just gameplay programming, I like to divide them into three. And it's like my personal opinion on how to divide it. So first, we have AI, which of course stands for artificial intelligence. And when we think about AI, we think about NPCs, non-playable characters. So AI programming mainly handles NPCs' decisions, making them behave in a realistic way while also presenting challenges to the player. Then we also have gameplay systems. Now, this is kind of hard to define because it's a lot of things. Things like progression, game rules, balance, data, like game save or save game, or even things like points, currencies, skills, and attributes like we would see in role-playing games. And then we also have 3Cs, which is what I work on. Now, what is 3Cs? 3C stands for character, camera, controls. Not in this specific order. If you Google it, it's going to be like a little bit scrambled. But I like it in this order because then we can say that it is how the player moves through a level, how they perceive it, and how they engage with it. Now, when we talk about character, we're talking about the player's representation in the game. Everything from customization, animations, and how the player interacts with the environment. Like, it helps ground the experience. Now, a good camera, it's one that adapts to the gameplay context without the need for the player to manually adjust to it at all points. If we have a game where we can walk and then drive a car, the same camera will probably not work for both things. And if you don't notice the camera is changing, that's probably a very good camera system. And lastly, when we talk about controls, we talk about achieving an ergonomic and comfortable button mapping. And this also means an intuitive button mapping. So if you're going to place two actions that should be able to be done at the same time, for instance, like running and shooting, and you put it in a way where the player kind of struggles to press both buttons, that's probably not very good. So what we also talk about when we talk about controls is accessibility. Because, for instance, if you make your controls remappable, it ensures that more players can enjoy the game. And it's a relationship between these features that describes the game feel. So 3Cs is really like at the core, and it's the beating heart of a game. Okay, but like, what does a gameplay programmer actually do? And let's look at an example. And in this example, the gameplay programmer is you. Now, you are working, and you are making a 2D platformer game with this odd-looking character. And the goal of your game is extremely simple. The character must find a way to reach the goal, that circle over there. So, easy. And besides walking, this character can also jump on top of platforms in order to reach the goal. Now, the game designer, and for you, those of you who don't know, the game designer is kind of like a game architect. It's not someone who's designing graphics. So the game designer has an idea on how to improve the game. And they say, well, I think levels would be much more interesting if they were more vertical. So this means that we would use more platforms and require more jumps from the player. But as the player can only like jump once, we would need a lot of platforms on the screen, which would kind of like pollute it a little bit. So ideally, we would allow the player to double jump, making reaching those platforms possible. Now, you immediately picture what they mean because you played games before with similar mechanics. And it's kind of simple. You jump once, and then when you are in air and you press the jump button again, you jump while you are like airborne, which is not very realistic, but it works, and we kind of accept it as gamers. So, and you have seen this in old titles, new titles, 2D and 3D games. But while it seems kind of straightforward, you look at the code and you start getting some concerns. Because this is our jump manager, kind of like simplified version. And everything that we are doing is if we get a jump input, we jump, as long as we are on the ground. So this is an issue, right? Because the player can only jump when they are on the ground. And how do we fix this? Well, we can do this, right? We just remove all restrictions, and now the player can jump at any time. But what's going to happen? Well, this, because now we don't have any restrictions, so the player is actually going to be able to press it at all times, so he's going to be able to fly into the stratosphere, and that's not exactly what the game designer meant. So, okay, so let's go back again. Let's not remove those things, and let's see. Like, actually, we need to keep that ground check, but we need something extra, something to limit the amount of jumps. Now, without making this like into a very complicated thing, let's just add a new variable, and now we start counting the amount of jumps that are done airborne, and we just add like an extra check over there and say, well, if you already jumped while you are in air, you cannot do it again. So now we can jump when we are on ground and once when we are in air, which, well, it's a double jump. So this is what we have now. We jump, we double jump. So you are done. You just did the task, super cool. Well, but are you done? Because like if we look at this again, this doesn't look very good. And if you remember the examples that we saw before, the double jump is not exactly this. Yes, you are jumping in air, but you're doing exactly the same motion at exactly the same time. And that's not exactly what players expect. And it just doesn't feel good. So there's questions that I have, and I hope you have, like about this, which is, well, should this second jump be as powerful as the first one? Should it describe exactly the same curve? Should it take exactly the same time? And, well, I have another concern. Like, what happens if the player just double taps the jump button? Like, will it just invalidate the first one? And if you just do it, it invalidates the first one. It looks like you only jumped once. It's not amazing. And actually, why are we stopping at double jump? Why are we restricting the system when we can make it do whatever we want and do as many jumps as we want? And this is actually like where it clicks. And so this is you after like it clicks and you have all these ideas. Oh yeah, okay, I'm going to do stuff. And you need to trust me that this code actually compiles and works and does what it is supposed to do, and answers all the questions that we had. So let's look at the result of your work. Ta-da! This is what you did. This is what you actually programmed, and this is not very exciting, but what it now allows is exciting. So we added the cooldown to the input, which means that we won't have these issues like when pressing two things at the same time. Instead of going, oh, this is a double jump, we actually say, well, you know, game designer that requested this, you have a way of defining how many jumps we can do. So if you want double jump, just put it 2. And now, instead of just being like we have one jump behavior and we can do it like multiple times, we can actually define for the ground jump, how is it going to be? You can define the default one for in air, and you can go even further, and then you can say, well, actually, you can go for each index, for each jump, do a different curve. So this is what we had, and we were doing like this jump, this motion over this duration of half a second. But now with the new system, the game designer can just go without your input and say, well, actually, I want to jump, but then I want to like fall faster, which is a bit more realistic. And they can change the duration to be bigger. Or they can say, well, I still want it to be the same curve, but I want it to be like a shorter jump, and I want it to be faster. Or they can go and say, well, actually, I would prefer if it was something that just pushes the player, and then the gravity system pulls him down like in a natural way. And we can do more than jumps, actually. Like if we collapse everything on the x-axis, now we are just doing a forward dash. And if we put it down, we're actually doing like a ground pound. So we can jump and we can do a ground pound. So in the end, we can do something interesting like jump, double jump, forward dash. And this is much more interesting than we had before. And we are still doing, we are still providing a system where the game designer, if they don't want dashes or whatever, they can just do what they wanted. But they can also do this. So hopefully this is how the game designer feels after you provide them with the system, minus the wrinkles, I hope. So let's see what you did. You programmed, but you also designed. You understood the game, and you could foresee new, interesting ways for the player to interact with it, to interact with the level, and to interact with the character, and so you programmed accordingly. Because even if we don't end up having a forward dash and a ground pound, or any mechanic we can do here, the foundations for them to be possible are there. So to excel at game programming, you need to speak design language. What I mean with this is that during your interaction with others, it's important to understand design terms and to speak of the game in game terms. Mechanics and actions versus classes and variables. And ideally, as a gameplay programmer, you are able to design games on your own, even if they do not end up being game design staples or amazing games, but you understand the process. You need to be technically strong, but practical and pragmatic. As a gameplay programmer, most of what you do is unlock others so they can do their job, like we just did for the double jump game designer. So delivering a solid solution faster that you can iterate on later if needed is often better than taking too long to deliver a perfect solution that in practice does the same. Of course, do not use this as an excuse to deliver broken, awful code. You need to have a good sense of player feel. You need to be able to stop and evaluate how the game plays after your changes, because that's what's going to determine if they are valid or not. Even if you end up, because in the end, like, you are making a game, you're not making a coding exercise. Even if they answer what was strictly asked from you, if they result in poor fill, there are high chances that you will be asked to change what you did later. You need to understand how an entire system works. As a gameplay programmer, you often own a system or a big part of it. So you become the expert people go to when they have doubts, when they need support, or when they need something changed. So fully understanding a feature makes it easier to do those changes. You should definitely aim to build open, configurable solutions. I can guarantee you 100% that the initial solution we did with just with a non-configurable double jump will deprecate very fast. And in a matter of days or maybe hours, someone will come and say, hey, actually, I need to change the curve of the second jump at least. So if you build your solutions as open and configurable as possible, you will reduce the amount of work that you need to do, which means you will have more time to work on something else that needs your attention. But however, I also advise you to add restrictions. For instance, we expose a curve for the jump, but also a duration. Like, make sure that that duration cannot be negative. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. And of course, time shouldn't be negative, but you'd be surprised at the amount of times that people make mistakes. And most importantly, you need to be an excellent problem solver. Most of the time is spent thinking about the solution and connecting invisible dots. Writing code down is a necessity, but not the end goal. There are many times that I'm asked to solve something because whoever is asking me believes it's a code problem, and I end up delivering a solution without even writing a single line of code. So that's much more important than like being an amazing programmer. Now, how to become a gameplay programmer? First, a public service announcement. All the tips I will give you here work for me. They are not a blueprint on how to get into the video game industry, but I really hope that at least they increase your chances. So tip number one, just start. Start making games now or when you arrive home or tomorrow, but as soon as possible, just make games. Because there are a lot of free engines, and there's a lot of resources on YouTube or Udemy, or like you just Google it. There's tutorials to do almost anything that you want to do. I personally recommend Unity because it is widely used in the industry. It's user-friendly, and you can easily find tutorials to almost anything you can think of. However, if you want to stick to C++ and you want to work in something that is more used in AAA games, then you probably want to explore Unreal. But it's a heavier engine, and you need like a better computer to run it. And lastly, we have Godot, which is a more recent engine. It is growing fast, and it seems like a very interesting alternative, although I cannot vouch for it because I haven't used it myself. It is open source, and it allows you to program in a variety of different languages. There are other engines. If you only know Python, for instance, look up for a Pygame, or you can program in HTML5. There's a lot of things, and usually for any programming language that you are looking at. And I previously showed you all the games that I released so far, but this is my actual portfolio. And I care about these games that I did on my spare time at least as much as I care about the ones I did professionally. Everything you do and every single game matters. Each game presented here pushed me to learn new ways of making games. And the vast majority of them were made with others in game jams, which are short-length game-making marathons, usually taking 48 hours, where you team up with others to make a game under a theme. They are excellent tools to build up your portfolio fast, so I recommend you to attend game jams. Now, tip number 2, go abroad. I know, but Portugal still has a long way to go to make itself attractive to most gaming companies. And we still lack clear legislation on games or even incentives as we have for other cultural fields. And as such, we have not seen yet the boom in the gaming industry here. In the end, what this means is that it results in a lot of competition for few places, and especially few available spots for newly grads. Like if we look at something like Grackle HQ, which I recommend you to look at because it aggregates a lot of job opportunities. On the day that I looked at it, which was like this week, there was a total of 9,934 open positions, for which 18 were in Portugal, which is like almost nothing. Of course, this is not a scientific method. There's probably more than 18 positions, but well, maybe there's probably more than 9,934 open positions in total. So it's just to give you an idea, take it with a grain of salt. And also abroad, you're going to find another level of seniority. It is totally different to work with seasoned game makers that have vast experience in different titles across platforms and generations. And I'm not saying you will not find that in Portugal, but abroad and in the right context, like Malmo, it is a certainty that you will always be surrounded by people who have a lot to teach you. The reason why it is harder in Portugal is that there are still no conditions for the game developers that left to come back and share all their expertise with the ones who remain and the ones who are starting out. And if going abroad is something that makes sense for you, I recommend you to look up Ubisoft graduate program. I'll start with the bad news. You could only apply till like 2 days ago, so it's a bit unfortunate. But this happens every year, so just keep an eye on it. You can apply if you are graduating or graduated in the same year. What it is, basically, it's an international program to kickstart your game dev career. You can go to one studio and spend the 2 years there, or you can actually split like 1 year in each studio and in different countries, which also probably means different projects, which is like quite nice. So if you must stay, it's all cool. It's not as apocalyptic as I said, I think, and I'm sorry if it sounded like too bad. But the Portuguese industry is slowly growing, and slowly growing is better than being stale. But for sure, there are much more opportunities now than when I left 2 years ago, and that speaks for this growth. There are new studios appearing, and there are international companies opening branches here in Portugal, mainly in Lisbon and in Porto, and they do it by opening up new offices or by acquiring pre-existing studios. And for the ones that are more established, they are actually managing to retain talent because they have enough work, or because they have more interesting projects, or probably like the most important, because they manage to match what is financially offered in some other places. Now, this is not all the studios that exist in Portugal, like not at all, but for sure it's some that I know that will probably be in a position of hiring because they have enough structure for it. So there are some names here, like from international companies that are here, others that are local only, but yeah, some names for you to keep an eye on. And besides that, we also have a small but very passionate community of indie developers. This is just 4 games, like that I pick a bit of random, but games that were released this year or will be released this year. And yeah, these games start getting like more and more attention, and the more attention we have in not only like what the big studios do, but also on what the small studios and solo developers do. This will all contribute for the industry to grow here, and with the industry growing, more opportunities for everyone. And so my last tip for you, network. Because besides my family, my friends, the weather, and the seafood, one of the things that I miss about in Portugal is the game dev community that I met along the way. So they embraced me when I knew nothing about game development, besides the fact that I want to give it a try. So attend meets, go to game jams. Yeah, so attend meets, go to game jams, and try to talk with the people that you see there. Everyone has something to teach you, an excellent game to show you, or often inspire you in some way. These events are not just for people employed in game dev. It's for everyone who wants to give it a try, or it's just interested in the subject. There are open events, the community is super chill. I think like there's a lot of people like just talking, drinking beer, so definitely definitely go there, because knowing others and having others know you is the best way to be part of interesting future projects, knowing who to call when you need someone to collaborate with or when you are looking for a new opportunity. Now, to do this in Portugal, there's 3 associations/communities that you should check out. If you are based in Lisbon, probably Game Dev Lisbon is the one you should check. They organize events such as Meets, but also Game Dev Camp, which is a conference just for game development, as well as the indie space in Lisbon Games Week. So if you were there and you saw like indie developers this year, it was their work. In Porto, in FEUP, we have NCGM. They are responsible for organizing the Game Dev Meets over there. And lastly, we have Game Developers PT, which is a Discord server where a lot of the developers from Portugal are present. So if you just want to ask questions like, how do I get a job? Or even like you are trying to make your first game, you have an issue with Unity, you can just go there, ask. There's always someone who will help you out. Now, for a long time during my studies, I did not know what I wanted to do. And for the most time, I didn't even want to be a programmer. Because there were no projects that interested me or excited me incredibly, or not something that I could relate and say, oh, this is what I want to do for the rest of my life. Till I understood that I could program games. And more importantly, that I could just do it, because game making nowadays is more open than ever, and there are more resources available than ever. There is a never-ending discussion about the future of games, about the nature of games, mainly if games are art or not, like of course they are, but yeah, it's a discussion. If they are truly universal, if they are mature enough as a medium to take risks. And for me, all of that can be up to debate. But I believe it is undeniable, and I will like stand my ground when affirming that games are dreams. And I don't know if I want to be a programmer forever, but I'm 100% sure that I want to be a dream maker. Thank you. Yeah. And follow me, follow Massive. Yeah.
Thank you, João, for your amazing talk. Now we'll proceed to any questions you guys have. Anyone?
You talked about the importance of networking and a lot of those things. But as far as programming, for example, actually goes, what would you say are like a good basis to start on and a good way to get into the industry?
Yeah, so for me, I would say like for programming, I think it's a bit general, not just for programmers, but the best way is to really to just do it. It's like, of course, you need to know certain things. Definitely, like if you want to work in bigger games, C++ is a must. But if you just want to go to Unity or something like that, C# is totally fine. But it's a bit hard, and I think it depends from person to person. But for me, it's a bit hard to just follow along like a Unity course and, oh, now I know everything, because then you find different problems. So the best way is to do it. And when you reach areas like, oh, I don't know how to do something with physics, I don't know how to do UI, you actually search just for that specific topic, and then you know. And then you can just use that to present new companies with. Like I showed like this amount of games that I have, and they are all a bit different. So there are VR games, like first-person games, more games that are probably like more fun, games that are like very depressing. And the fact that you try different stuff out then helps when applying, because different studios look at different stuff. And many times you don't know what you are applying to. You just know that you are applying to a studio. You don't know what they are working on, but they can see some game that you did. It's like, oh, actually, this really this is really the same thing, or it's really similar. So yeah, make games. I think it's the best.
Thank you.
Does anyone else have any question?
You've mentioned that one of the points of having opportunities in game dev was leaving Portugal to get more experience.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of a clear, defined opportunity that being outside gave you in comparison to trying here in Portugal?
Sorry?
So what was the most clear thing that you got from being in a different country?
Okay. Yeah. So this is the thing. I'm not. When I say like you need to go abroad to work in games, I'm basically giving you a tip. I'm not giving you a recipe. You can make games here. I made games here for a while. It's just that if you go abroad, there are much more opportunities. So you kind of like going the easy way, let's say. So it can save you a lot of trouble if you go. But just to give you a different perspective, so I just showed like all these pictures from Game Dev Meets, and we have the same in Malmo. But when I am in Malmo, like if I am here, most of the people that go to the meets, most of the people I'm surrounded with are students. But if I am in Malmo, the people who are around me are people that made games that I played and that I look up to. So I think it's like you need to surround yourself by winners, I guess, like so that you grow faster. And it's not that there are not a lot of winners here. There are a lot, but it's just easier if you go abroad. However, if you are starting out, there's a lot to learn with everyone that you're going to find and everyone that you're going to meet.
I think we have time to one more question, if anyone. Okay.
You mentioned how games can be considered, in my opinion, and I think in yours as well, are an art form, and each individual game could be considered a piece of art. And obviously, big games, AAA games, have a lot of teams coordinating, working together to fulfill one creative vision. As an individual, would you say there is, especially as a game designer, a lot of room to express your individual creativity, or are you more beholden to someone else's vision in this career, or is there like a mix of both and space for some of your own vision?
Yeah, so that's also one of the reasons to make your own games, is that because there you do whatever you want, but at work you still have some space. Because, like I showed you this example of the designer coming to you and saying, oh, I want double jump. And sure, you can just go and do that. The designer could also have come to me and said, I want a system that does this, and you can put the jumps and whatever. And then as a programmer, you cannot do much. Like, you do that if it answers all the questions. So sometimes by having things a bit abstract, it means that you can actually like push your ideas forward a little bit. And then the question is, depending on what type of game you are working on, like if your game is based on an IP, maybe you are like more restricted a little bit. But what it is you just have more limits, but you need to work within those limits. Like you're never like fully restricted that you have no space to be creative or no space to try to improve something. You can always do it. Of course, it's not like, oh, we are making a racing simulator game, and you say, yeah, it would be cool if this had zombies. Like, okay, like you cannot just like do that, right? But otherwise, and if you know the limits, and if you don't see the limits as limits, but more as like creative suggestions and restrictions, then you can be really creative under that.
Okay, thank you. We'll now proceed to the prize awarding. If you have any more questions for João, he'll be outside the auditorium by the showcase, so feel free to ask him any more questions you have.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you, João.